welcome to Season 8, Episode 335 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, starting my 19th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources, so whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast says something for you. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at @LMS_United. On Threads and Instagram, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Bluesky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Friends, it is now my pleasure to introduce our sponsor to the podcast, Junior Library Guild. What if I told you that there's a collection development service that can save you time and increase title circulation rates? Junior Library Guild does that and more. With their team of experienced media library specialists and publishing industry professionals, every title they recommend is vetted for my readers and organized into categories based on reading level and interest. Ultimately, Junior Library Guild helps my students foster a love of reading. Use the code UNITED15 to receive 15 free books in your very first shipment. Before we dive into today's conversation, I wanted to invite our listening audience to participate in an important survey. And I know because most everybody tuning in right now is highly opinionated on all things library related. Friends, you're not going to want to miss this opportunity, especially if you happen to use the Library of Congress subject headings with any regularity. I learned about this opportunity from two amazing library professionals, Deborah Tamaras and Cecilia Caride. They represent the ALA's Core Subject Analysis Committee Working Group, and they have generated a survey which is hoping to collect feedback from library workers, archivists, and others who use the Library of Congress subject headings about the potential impacts of the change on your collection, your catalog, staff, and patrons. And they're encouraging you to take part in this survey. It's 10 to 20 minutes long to complete, and includes questions related to genres and form subdivisions in your catalog and your library processes. You'll be asked additional questions about the library that you support, and they are going to gather this information anonymously, and they will not be sharing any personal information whatsoever. There is contact information in this form. They are asking you to participate and submit your feedback by Friday, September 19th of 2025. There is also an email in here where you can follow up with additional questions. And friends, let's help out this group, because I know that there are those of you who really could help this information gathering process. And I hope we can all participate in supporting one another, because that is what we do here. And now for today's episode, Freedom to Read Teen Advocacy Toolkit, and my conversation with Emma Eriksson and Kelly Jensen. Friends, I'm so excited. Emma Eriksson, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there, Amy. Thanks so much for having me.
Friends, we are in for a treat today. When I went to ALA Annual in Philadelphia, I am committed to bringing some of that talent and content to our listeners, and this is one of those episodes. So I'm so excited. We've got Freedom to Read Teen Advocacy Toolkit. Emma Eriksson, would you introduce yourself and tell us about the library you work in and your role?
Sure. Hi. So my name is Emma Eriksson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the manager of youth civic engagement and expression at the Brooklyn Public Library. I have many jobs that I oversee at Brooklyn Public, but the main core of my job is that I work on the Books Unbanned program that we launched in April 2022.
Amazing. I know we're going to learn a lot more about that program, especially because it's one that has been so generously spread far and wide. And I remember learning about it when it was first launched. Amazing. And returning to the show, friends, we've got Kelly Jensen. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me back.
And friends, if you recognize Kelly's name, it's because she writes for Book Riot. So having a lot of opportunities to draw on that content, I'm very grateful to Book Riot and the work that Kelly does. So I'm so excited to have you here. So friends, we kicked off 2025 and the new year with episode 303, Anti-Censorship, and my conversation with Kelly Jensen. So for listeners who are meeting you for the first time, give us some background because I'm fairly certain they've read some of your work.
Sure. So my name is Kelly Jensen, and I am an editor at Book Riot. I've been there for, I think, 12 years at this point. But prior to working for Book Riot, I worked in several public libraries, working both with teens and children. So my background is in librarianship, and then I transitioned into writing and editing. Since I started working at Book Riot, I have written on book censorship from the beginning. It was not as prolific back in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, et cetera. It was happening, but it wasn't on the scale that it is now. And so the last 4.5 years have really been a lot of coverage of censorship and the ongoing attacks on public and school libraries.
I think what happens is a lot of the content that you write on has been driven by the events that have been happening, and your responsiveness to that, it serves a public, it serves an important need. Can I ask, Emma and Kelly, when did you two meet? Because I have to imagine in this sort of, in the crosshairs, I'm trying to figure out how we have Emma and Kelly. Where did you two connect professionally?
So I can take that one. So I actually met Kelly via email when I was brought into this role, which was barely 11 months ago. Kelly and my supervisor, Karen Keyes, who is the coordinator of young adult programs and services at Brooklyn Public Library, they had already been in conversation about this toolkit that they wanted to put together. And so when I was brought in, I was looped together with Kelly on a bunch of emails and then had some virtual meetings to begin working on a relationship to oversee what was going on in the toolkit, see, where she needed help, where I could step in, give some advice. But, of course, nerdily, I had already been a fan of Kelly's, already signed up to her, incredible email lists about book censorship. So I was already familiar with her and her work. So it was just to be connected via email to really begin our now deeply connected relationship.
I mean, and to give a little bit more context to that too, I know that this is something you're going to ask as we have this conversation, but I was first contacted by Karen Keyes back in, I think it was like July of 2022, which feels like decades ago, even though it's not that long ago. And she had asked me to talk with the intellectual freedom group teens as an author and as somebody who's been working in an intellectual freedom space. Fast forward about a year, she had asked if I might be interested in working with the Books Unbanned program with this grant project they were going to do. They didn't get the grant money for this particular project. And then a few months later, she emailed me again and was like, actually, we're just going to do it. We have the funding to make this happen. Let's make it happen. So I started working officially on it, I think, in April of 2024. And then, Emma, I think you started in July or August. Is that right? Yeah, I worked a little bit before Emma came on and then was so grateful she was on board because I think that there's so much going on with the Books Unbanned folks and team and like so many projects that having somebody that I could ask more questions to was really helpful.
The topic of today's conversation is Freedom to Read Teen Advocacy Toolkit, which was the crux of the presentation. We're in ALA's annual conference in Philly. But I do want to sort of back up and talk about Brooklyn Public Library's Books Unbanned program, because I knew about it, but I don't know if our listening audience knows just how profoundly meaningful this program has been. And it's been going on. We're on year 3, is that right, of Books Unbanned?
We're in our 3rd year. It started in April 2022. And as, Kelly had mentioned, right, it's like censorship and librarianship have unfortunately always sort of gone hand in hand. So yes, we are currently in our 3rd year, Books Unbanned. It started in April of 2022. It was a direct response to the uptick in censorship that started to increase in 2020. Unfortunately, censorship and intellectual freedom issues has always existed, but we really saw that big swell taking place, and folks in Brooklyn wanted to come together and be able to respond to it directly. Messages of support are important, but we knew that the big issue was materials were being taken away from young people. And we wanted to say, what could we do? How can we actively push back and bring materials back? So there was lots of conversations on what that could look like. And it was, we'll temporarily create these cards that teens anywhere in the United States can access our collections. And maybe we'll do it for about a year. 3 years later, this program and project has expanded beyond, I think, anyone's imagination, with 6 partner libraries who also have their own card. We have created this toolkit. We are offering funding to small and rural libraries to also run their own programs. We have an internship program for teens here in Brooklyn. There's lots of other moving parts beyond our initial tiny idea to open up our collection to teens anywhere across the United States, from Alaska to Nebraska to Florida.
I think what's fascinating is, for librarians, access is everything. And when physical books are removed from collections, we all know this doesn't remove the copies that are entirely in existence. But when we're talking about equity and we're talking about access, plenty of students cannot just pull up Amazon on their phones and buy a copy. That's prohibitive, and it shouldn't. That's not the solution. The solution was to provide a digital card to teens, I think through the age of 19?
13 to 21 is our cards.
Okay, so digital card, 13 to 21, and it was to, forgive me, is it, because I remember broadcasting this to my students because I was so excited about it, is it to your entire digital collection or titles that have been banned throughout the country?
So exactly like you said, access is the most important thing in terms of librarianship. And it isn't just, availability of materials on a shelf. It is availability of materials in every sense of the word. The Books Unbanned card is available to young people 13 to 21 anywhere in the United States. And our Brooklyn Public Library card gives you access to everything in the Brooklyn Public Library's digital collection. So that's ebooks, that's audiobooks. It also includes all of our databases. So they have access to Comics Plus, which gives them hundreds of pages of everything from Batman to Heartstopper. We also have homework help databases that they can use. Our partner libraries each have their own Books Unbanned card that has different age ranges. And some were limiting their collections to only be banned books, but now each card allows those who have the card to access their entire digital collections. Because for us, it's not just that they can access the banned books, it's that they can access anything that they want to.
Can I just say, as a librarian who, in the past, I've been able to issue digital cards from our public library to my students, the new board came in and the rules changed. And when the new board came in, under threat of losing funding, the public library now requires, and you mentioned Comics Plus, and this is why I want to tag in, Comics Plus is all ages. And my board at the library said, because Comics Plus is all ages, all of a sudden those digital cards that my students had are no longer valid until they get an e-signature and driver's license from a parent. And it was soul crushing because as somebody who I can't afford Comics Plus. And now saying to my students who have been enjoying all of those digital privileges from the public library and saying, actually, you aren't 18, you're going to now need to go get permission from your family. And that was really a tough pill to swallow. But my local library said, we will jeopardize our funding unless we add this requirement that we get parental approval, which I'm sorry, but for some families, they're not going to bother. And that leaves my students in a lurch because I can't afford Comics Plus.
Right. We know that a lot of these databases and ebook licenses and audiobook licenses are incredibly costly. I do think that there is a misunderstanding from the public exactly the cost of an ebook, and it isn't you buy one ebook and everybody can use it. There are licenses, there are these fees. It's cost prohibited. We have a lot of teens who, when they fill out the form for our application, they're allowed to share with us, a testimonial about why they want the card. And if they say something and if they don't, it doesn't matter. We just always are interested to understand why teens are accessing these cards. And a lot of them say, I have a sight disability and I need ebooks and my library cannot afford them. Or I live, too far away from the local library. I can't get a ride there. My parents can't afford the gas money. So to be able to access things electronically or digitally allows me to read and use library resources. There are so many different reasons that young people might need access to books unbanned. That could be anything, again, from physical distance to a library, just wanting to be able to use audiobooks or ebooks for different visual or hearing disabilities. They may also just want to be able to have a little bit of privacy with what they read and not have to carry around a book cover, that may out them under certain circumstances. So being able to say, books unbanned cards allow you to access anything that you want is very important for this program.
A lot of those responses about why the teens wanted cards were cataloged. So we were able to highlight at Book Riot what some of those reasons are. And going through this, it was really, really eye-opening because the Brooklyn Books Unbanned card is doing so much more than providing access to banned books. One of the things that really stood out to me as I was going through these last fall, there were a number of students who were requesting cards from the same town in Illinois. And I'm thinking to myself, why? It shouldn't, Illinois is, yes, we have banned book issues and I don't want to write that off, but certainly why so many kids from the same town? What is going on there? Well, I went and looked up the public library, and the public library is only open from 9 to 12, most days of the week because it's such a small town. They have a volunteer librarian. They're not open that frequently. So the Books Unbanned card was their opportunity to have access to books when they're in school and can't go to the public library. I think we forget that that's the reality in a lot of places still. And so the Brooklyn Books Unbanned card is really an opportunity for so many young people who just don't have access to have access and to have access to these world-class collections.
I remember I was told by somebody in my school, well, the kids can just walk to the public library. We have a beautiful public library. I said, we are 3 miles away. We are 3 miles away. And I appreciate if it's a lovely day out, sure. Can they walk 3 miles? Well, yeah, but 3 miles is a long ways to walk if you get out at 3:00 in the afternoon. And come on.
That's an hour of time. That's an hour of somebody's time, it could be beautiful out, but we also we have to respect the fact that 3 miles is not short and it's time consuming. Why should some kids have to lose an hour or two of their day to go get a book that their peers don't have to lose?
Exactly. Today's conversation, we are talking about the Teen Advocacy Toolkit, and you've started to talk about some of the reasons why the Books Unbanned really sort of was necessary when it was created. Let's shift to talking about this Freedom to Read Teen Advocacy Toolkit. It is not insignificant. Friends, it is a 164-page PDF, which has been freely shared by the Brooklyn Public Library and the amazing people who generated it. Thank you very much in our show notes. But please let us know, how did you sort of pivot from saying, we have this amazing Books Unbanned program with the digital e-cards, but then moving into this space where you needed a toolkit which would help support these students given the stressors that we are experiencing in this time in American history?
Books Unbanned always knew that it was going to be the e-card, but that it was important for us to find ways to connect and empower teens across the country to understand that they had rights, that they should be able to access materials, and really shape this program around what it was that was important to them, what they wanted, what they needed. So originally there was a relationship between Brooklyn Public Library and PEN America, where we ran these online Freedom to Read advocacy institutes that were, open to any teen across the country. They got to hear from PEN America. They got to hear from us at Books Unbanned at Brooklyn Public Library. They learned about the history of censorship. They learned about different means of advocacy, and try to, give them some skills and some information on, how they could be Freedom to Read ambassadors. We then pivoted that to be an in-person internship that the Brooklyn Public Library runs called the Freedom to Read Teen Ambassador program. And through that program, we realized that focuses right on our in-person Brooklyn teens. But we recognize that this program affects the teens all across the country. How can we give them the same experience without me having to go to every single library in every single state and run this program? Because that is just not physically possible. So we pulled together the materials that we had used for our PEN America online programs, as well as our in-person ones. And this is where my supervisor, Karen Keys, reached out to Kelly to pull this together into something where any library, or really it doesn't have to be a library, right? Any school, any youth group, anyone that's working with teens who wants to run these programs could just open the book, read through the instructions, and run it themselves.
Yeah. Kelly, did you want to jump in there? It's like before I jump in there.
Yeah. That was the conversation that Karen and I had started in 2023, and then it was a go in spring 2024. It was really an opportunity to look at what the materials were, and see what could be expanded, what could be built upon, and what would serve libraries. I was thinking of libraries, of course, but schools and other youth organizations. What would serve those institutions in places where book censorship was going to be a hot topic, where it wasn't going to fly, and to think about creating a toolkit that could be used just about anywhere, that would provide skills and pass along knowledge and empower young people where they're at. Brooklyn is very different politically than, say, a small library in Iowa or in Idaho, right? And so the things that were able to be talked about and covered in Brooklyn may be a little bit different than in those smaller towns. And so I took what was given to me and thought about, okay, this worked really well in Brooklyn. This is going to work well pretty much anywhere. Let's expand upon it. And then here's a hole for an opportunity for kids in a smaller community who may not have access to these sorts of educational opportunities or mentorships that are available in such a huge city like Brooklyn. What could be created to give them those opportunities? So, that is how it was built, how it was conceived of. I will say, when I started, Emma hadn't joined yet. So I talked with Karen and some of the other folks on the Books Unbanned team, and I was like, well, what do you want this to look like? And they're like, have fun. And I was like, okay. It's really awesome, right? You have this blank slate, but also you have an outline. So you have like the best of both worlds, but at the same time, like, I'm not a Brooklyn Public Library employee. I don't know exactly what would be right here. And I had great communication throughout, but was really, really glad when I had Emma on board so that I could like toss some ideas out as well and have somebody to go back and forth with on some of these thoughts and have somebody to brainstorm with, because she was able to bring in some pieces that I just did not have the ability to do or think about. She was also able to pull in her experience working with the kids in Brooklyn.
Just say as a high school librarian, but also as a former social studies teacher. And friends, I'm just scrolling through the table of contents on this Freedom to Read Teen Advocacy Toolkit, and I see 16 units, 16 sort of activities. There's 4 chapters, and then there's 4 sessions in each. But I see application not just for me personally, because I was asked by some rising seniors on one of the last days of school, hey, would you sponsor our banned book club? I did start to privately cry, but nobody saw that. But I was so taken aback. I was so excited that somebody asked me, and I didn't have to like come up with this idea and approach kids, but they came to me. So that's how we're starting the school year. But I looked at your units and said, wait a minute, we are a social justice class. Could absolutely key in on some of the concepts that you are addressing in this toolkit. Our government classes could absolutely see this as a launch for some of their activities. And as well, we have our public speaking class. When we have a public speaking class, we've got our government class, and we've got our social justice class. Everybody could look at this and find ways to incorporate these amazing approaches towards sort of intellectual freedom and teenagers and advocacy, and encouraging them to become more take a role in articulating what it is that matters to them.
That was the goal, really. You know, I'll let Emma speak more on this too, but as I was thinking about it, I was like, you know, what are some of the skills that go into being an advocate for anything that you care about, whether it's book bans, whether it's libraries, whether it is something completely different. Skills involve learning how to be a good listener, learning how to create a good argument, learning how to be a good public speaker. So I thought about those things and realized that like one of the big benefits of including that kind of stuff is that it can be used in so many different places, and it could be used especially in places where covering banned books is going to be a problem. But what if you ran a teen speech club, or you offered a workshop on like building your listening skills, learning how to public speak? There's a really great template in there on how to create a short, effective, like, here's why I care about this thing, and why you should care about it too. And those are skills that they're hard to teach in a regular curriculum, but they are so vital for any sort of leadership, any sort of activism or advocacy for young people, as well as for not so young people.
Absolutely. Yes, Emma.
I wanted to is that when this was created, we definitely had a lot of conversations about how do we make this supportive and flexible to any situation. And we decided not to say necessarily, this is a curriculum that is going to teach your teens how to be anti-censorship warriors. It was, this is a curriculum for you to use to share with your audience, and we are using the idea of intellectual freedom and book bans as the backbone, as the examples. But you can take this curriculum and use it towards any issue that you're facing in your community. You can use one activity, you can use 3 lessons, you can edit things to tailor it how you need it, how you want it for whatever the situation is that you're using. And again, that it's meant to be tailored and altered to fit the specific needs of you and your community, recognizing that not every community could even say freedom to read without some type of backlash.
Say when I was given kind of the blank slate on do whatever with this, the thing that came to mind immediately and that I knew was going to be a thing that I wanted to be like really sure stuck was that the curriculum is flexible. So there are 4 units, there are 4 sessions within each unit, but you can pick and choose your adventure here. So if something isn't going to work for you, you can skip it, and that's fine. There are some activities that build upon prior skills, but if you don't do those skills, you're not going to miss out on the value of the activity itself. And part of that is so that it's flexible for communities. Part of that is also flexible because your audience is going to differ. Sometimes you have a group of very outgoing, extroverted teens who want to do all of the very big, bold things. Sometimes you have a group of teens where they're all introverted and what they want to do is write and not really talk to each other. So how do you meet the needs of both of those? And so the goal is that you can meet them and you can push those teens just a little bit to build those skills, and not feel like if something isn't working, you can't use the rest of the curriculum. You absolutely can.
Well, and I have talked to school librarians outside of the United States, and while they have been very grateful that many of these attacks on our collections have not made their way across the pond or to our teacher librarians in Australia and New Zealand, I don't see why these concepts couldn't also have relevance in their school programs as well, because when you're talking about students exercising this leadership and articulating what is important to them in a public way, these are skills which transfer across all sorts of causes. These are skills that translate well into young people as they become adults.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that you're building the next cohort of your gung-ho library advocates. It's that you are doing the work in which we support teens to become the best versions of themselves.
Absolutely. I do want to talk a little bit about your presentation at ALA Annual, because when you submit those proposals, you are always hopeful that your proposal is going to get picked up. And I'm sure you are very excited to learn that you're going to be presenting at the national conference. I do think that for anybody who's ever submitted a proposal to a conference would be amused to find out the circumstances under which you are presenting, because as with many people who present at the state level, at their local conferences, you really are at the whim and mercy of the scheduling committee that decides who's presenting where and when. But give us an idea of who you had to verse, because as my littles would call it, who were you versing when your session was also going on?
So we were so excited when we heard that our proposal was selected, and we were eagerly awaiting to hear when we were going to be presenting. We got all set up. We, were thinking about what we're going to bring, what we're going to do. And then I got a message from Karen Keys, who was co-presenting with us, who said, "You won't believe who is also presenting during your time slot." And I was like, "Oh, who could it be?" And it was Carla freaking Hayden. And I think all of our stomachs dropped a little, only because we all wanted to go see her talk. And we're really bummed that it meant that we couldn't. And then it hit that, oh, she's going to be speaking when we are presenting. Are we going to be talking to an empty room? And we actually addressed it in the very beginning of our presentation. We thanked everybody for not seeing Carla Hayden and said, "Please don't get up if you think you want to go to her session. It's already full."
We have no control. As presenters, you have no control where, when, time, place, whether it's the 8 a.m. session, that's a killer. Whether you are the 8 a.m. session that kicks off that day, or as I had to do most recently in one of my conferences, I was the 4:30 on a Friday. And it was 4:30 on a Friday, and it was the Friday before about a third of our districts were starting their spring breaks. Many of them had left at noon anyway. So, yes, presenting at 4:30 on a Friday, I brought candy. I was like, "Stay, I have candy." I was like trying to be just grateful to the people who are not trying to get a head start on the Detroit congestion and the the freeways. So no, we have no control over any of that. So, I'm very grateful. As I said, I have been asked to sponsor a banned book club at my high school, and I'm so excited to start this year. But I have to tell you that when my students asked me in June, I sort of in my head said, wow, I wonder if I'll learn anything when I go to my national conference at the end of June that might help me with this, ambitious group of kids who want to have this banned book club. And then I saw the session that you were offering, and I was like, oh, this is phenomenal. So I'm very grateful because you have included the resources in the show notes. It really is. Friends, this is a 164-page PDF, as well as the presentation. We also included your presentation that you gave when you were also there. So, again, a wonderful thing for anybody who didn't get to see you in person.
Yeah, and on the booksunbanned.com/toolkit, if you go to that link, which will be in the show notes, you can download. It's an interactive PDF, and there is also the ability to download all of the worksheets that are included in the toolkit separately, and to access the slide decks, which were created by Kelly. And they're meant to be downloaded and edited so that you can really customize them. So all of the materials from the presentation and the toolkit are spelled out as much as possible. We are also hoping in the future to do a little walkthrough videos of the toolkit, a little bit more in depth, but we try to make it as, plug and play as possible with these resources.
I was going to add, things like the slide decks were really fascinating to create. I have made many a slide deck in my life. I have never made a slide deck in my life that somebody else would be giving. And so the notes, the speaker notes in the slide decks are very, very extensive, full of additional resources. Anybody can use the slide decks as is, but ultimately what I hope, and I think the goal is here is that those serve as a template. So you can start with what's there, but you have all of these resources to really adapt to your own needs. So some of the, slide decks might not be useful for you. That's okay. Adapt them to make them useful for you.
And the words that came to mind was turnkey and ready-made, an absolute gift for somebody who has other things they need to do during the day. And then when my club shows up at 3:15, we've got a place to start that I didn't have to start from scratch, I guess is the point. Like I appreciate that you recognize that the people who would most benefit from this would also appreciate a little bit of a head start, somewhere to get started. Again, turnkey, ready-made. This program is really meant to, you sort of hit the ground running with the content so that you don't lose momentum when you have these students who are coming to you, these young people coming to you who want very much to be able to exercise their ability to really make that impact on their school and their community.
Yeah, as a young adult librarian in a branch for many years, the number one thing that would turn my brain inside out was programming ideas. I would say, I want to do this, but I don't necessarily have the time to research resources, to come up with the pitch I'm going to give, to determine what supplies do I need for the activity. And if this resource was going to be successful, we had to make sure that it would be useful and not just another thing that created more stress, more drama for a different young adult librarian or educator who wanted to use this. I know Kelly got extensive feedback from folks about what it was that they wanted to see, what would be useful, how they wanted the toolkit laid out. And we tried to do exactly that. We didn't want to create something that was just going to be frustrating. We wanted it to be exactly plug and play, turnkey, ready to go, give as much as we could.
I mean, the reality is, as much as librarians are plugged in to what's going on, they don't know everything. And that's fine. this is an opportunity for them to learn as well and to not feel like they have to start from zero. They're starting from, say, a slide deck. They can go through that. Then they've got resources within that slide deck. And then each section of the manual itself has additional curated resources related to the topic of that particular unit. So there's video, there's audio, there's a little bit of everything to address all different learning styles and preferences.
Many of you have read Kelly's articles for Book Riot, and I imagine that Kelly having that Book Riot platform was really a great place to launch many of these lines of inquiry. But could you give us a sense of how your unique perspective as a writer for Book Riot has really lent itself when it comes to the Teen Advocacy Toolkit, because you were on board with this project from the very beginning?
Yeah, so I mentioned before, my background is in teen librarianship, so I have like an understanding of how libraries work, and I have an understanding of how they work in a number of different like locales. So I did suburban librarianship, I did rural librarianship, I did semi-urban librarianship, and kind of got a sense of the resources that can be available or not be available in different library settings. So there's that piece. There's my background in censorship and book banning and librarianship, attacks on librarianship that I was able to pull from. And then there's also that third piece of understanding mental health, because one of the big pieces in this kit that shows up at the end of every single session is this opportunity for young people to reflect on what they're learning and to reflect on what their experiences are. There's also a whole unit, and then woven through several other sessions, the idea of self-care and how important it is to check in with yourself, especially if you're a young person, especially if you're a young person who is engaged in any sort of advocacy or activism. And so having kind of these three areas of knowledge and expertise, I think, is what really helped pull this together. And also not being afraid to ask questions when I'm like, is this making sense to anybody but me? Because I spent many, many hours by myself at a coffee shop putting this together, being able to then email Emma and be like, hey, so what do you think about this? Or Emma and I having a conversation and her saying something along the lines of, you know, I did this really cool project. What do you think about this? Or there was a part in the toolkit where we talk about quilting and the ways that quilting has been a tool of social justice and activism. And a lot of that came from conversations with Emma talking about things she's done with her teens, and my going, oh yeah, there's a whole great thread here that we can then pull in that will connect with young people who get that, who want to learn more about that. And then there are built-in activities that build upon it as well.
And I have to imagine, too, Emma, because you work with teens all the time at the Brooklyn Public Library, that you have a very good sense of the kinds of programming which resonate and the kinds of things which fall flat. You know, as somebody who works with young people myself, I have obviously experienced when there was something that in theory I thought would be a home run, and then it just missed. So Emma, how about you, with all the experience that you've had working with young people, how did that also feed into the finished product which you then presented on at ALA?
Yeah, I have been fortunate enough to work with teens in terms of my library career, but also outside of it, as I've been an intern coordinator and a volunteer coordinator at a few different radical spaces here in New York City. And so I have seen the different ways teens show up excited and ready to go, and the many ways in which they show up and are halfway falling asleep. And so you have to still engage both of those groups of teens, but in the way that works for them and that they find interesting. So during our presentation, and even in the sort of helpful hints section of the toolkit, I talk about, if it's not working, don't force it. Be willing to pivot, be willing to alter the activity, change it up, take this part, use this, don't use that, and to authentically be yourself as opposed to who you think the teens want to interact with, because they can smell fear and they can smell a fake from a mile away. It is so much better to just lean into being the nerdy millennial and just say, yep, I don't know what this term means now, but back in my day, or make a joke about, that a cassette tape and a pencil are related, whatever it is. Also, in terms of making the toolkit, I think another thing that I was able to bring to it was this background that I have in community organizing and radical politics to really pull the advocacy skills into historical context that would be interesting to lots of different teens. So, for example, the quilting activity that Kelly already had, I said, oh, well, what if this group would be interested in learning more about that? So let's pull in some information about the history of the AIDS quilt. Let's pull in some information about the G's Bend quilters. Let's pull in, the just general information about craftivism and how that is in itself is a form of advocacy and activism work. So being able to take what Kelly had already been working on and just give it that extra, well, what if they want to go in that direction? Let's give them this other resource that maybe they don't even know about because they don't come from this type of background. So really providing many avenues for not only the instructors, but also the teens. If they got hooked on this one thing, how could it be expanded? How could you go a little bit deeper? How could you, just again, expand on what they were interested in?
Something that Emma brought up in our presentation and that I think comes through in the toolkit is that, this is a resource, but it's also meant to be an inspiration. So for folks who are going through it, they see something that might tie into a community group that they have in their community that they can then tap to bring in to present at the library or to be a speaker at the library. This toolkit isn't meant to be the only thing. It's meant to be a springboard to really build a community, because I think one of the things that we're really seeing that we have really struggling with throughout, I guess, America is community building and finding community and defining what community even means. That's part of one of the activities in the guide. And it's a great opportunity to then look in your own community and think, where can we make these connections? Where can the library build these connections? Where can we bring in this incredible tapestry of people, of talent, of skills, of passions that exist in our community, whether it is a community of 100 or 100,000, and get teens to know what's out there and to meet people and to build those relationships.
And Emma, I'm wondering, so it stands to reason that because you've been in on this from the beginning, some of this toolkit has been implemented in your space with the teens that you work with. Can I ask, how are you expanding on this? Because this is not a new program to Brooklyn. Brooklyn Public Library has incorporated this into the work that you do, your programming with area teens. How are you imagining next steps as you, as a teen librarian, look to see where can we go from here?
So for the Freedom Tree Teen Ambassador Internship Program, I use the Freedom Tree Teen Advocacy Toolkit that we put together essentially as a skeleton for our entire program. I look at the order that was given in the toolkit, right, where we start off with sort of basic knowledge, right? So what is a library? Why is it important? What is activism? Why is it important? Coming up with community definitions. That's the beginning of the internship. And then we move through the toolkit and we get a little bit deeper, right? We do some hands-on, okay, now you've learned about libraries and you've learned about censorship. Let's do some research activity. Let's understand why these books are being banned and how book banning affects young people and build off of that original knowledge. So our internship program definitely follows the path of the toolkit, but we get to expand on it. And I like to say, give it a little Brooklyn flavor. For example, when, there is an opportunity where we start talking about different activist strategies, I'm able to pull in some community organizations like Make the Road New York to come and talk about how do they run a campaign? How do they build community power? How do they get the word out about their issues? When there is the opportunity to teach them about public speaking, I get to bring in our incredible Brooklyn Public Library media team to give them some pointers on how to craft an argument. We take the toolkit and use it in the way that works best for us. As a guideline, we do some exact pulling of activities and replicate them, but a lot of it's using what's there in the way that makes the most sense for us, which might change, from month to month, from week to week.
I love how this banned book toolkit can be used in a variety of community settings and really sort of reflect more of the local issue. You can customize it and you can use it regardless if you are in a metropolitan area or you're in a rural area. I love how there's a lot of adaptability to it. And that it's free. Let's not forget.
I will say that the adaptability piece, again, has been key from the start, but that was one of the big things that librarians said they wanted. I was fortunate to hear from a lot of rural librarians and librarians who don't work in a system, so they don't have other teen librarians who they can brainstorm with. And what they said is they wanted something that they could do and adapt, and that, if they couldn't have a banned books program, they could still get something out of it, that they could still teach teens how to be advocates for what they care about, whatever that topic is.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show, sharing with our very, very lucky listening audience. We are moving into the beginning of the school year, and while I know what I'm going to be doing next week because I've got school starting, I am dying to know what is on your radar now that you are we're heading into the fall, and would you have something that you'd like to share with listeners that you're working on right now?
Well, we're going to be going to a number of conferences over the next year. Emma will be at the vast majority of them, but we're both going to be at the Association for Rural and Small Libraries down in Albuquerque in mid-September, where we will get to talk with small libraries about Brooklyn Books Unbanned, as well as a toolkit. We will be at the Public Library Association next year, same thing. And Emma, do you want to give a rundown of the 5 million other awesome places that you get to go and talk and meet library workers? Oh, she just took off her glasses and rubbed her brow. But that's a good thing.
So fall is a really exciting time for Books Unbanned and as well for the toolkit. We are feeling incredibly honored at the long list of conferences that we get to go to present about this toolkit and about the Books Unbanned program. So first up, we have the Association for Small and Rural Library Conference that's happening in Albuquerque. That'll be in September. In October, I will be heading out to Michigan to the Michigan Library Association Conference. In November, we are going to the New York Library Association Conference to present on the toolkit. And then I will also be presenting at CORE, which is happening in Denver, where I will talk about the toolkit, but will mostly just be giving other libraries an opportunity to understand what Books Unbanned is and how they can join us as a partner. And in 2026, we will be going to the Public Library Association Conference. We're going to have a booth where we'll be giving out printed copies of the toolkit, and we'll also be going to the American Library Association annual conference in 2026 in Chicago, where I'll also have printed copies of the toolkit, and we'll have a booth there that people can come and ask us questions. We will have swag to give out. I also want to mention something very exciting is that starting next week, we will announce the winners of these Books Unbanned program funding project that we launched, in which we are offering $50,000 to small and rural libraries across the United States so they can run their own freedom to read teen programs at their location. So they'll be getting up to $10,000 and they'll get printed copies of the toolkit. So the toolkit is one part, right? And then we know that libraries are chronically underfunded. And the second piece to that was for us to be able to say, let's take our donor money and provide these small and rural libraries with the financial support to run the programs that are in this toolkit.
Well, I love that you've made this so easy. You have created the template, you've created the platform, you've created the content, and now you're providing the funding to free up the individuals and to provide really absolutely no barriers to, you're going to provide the printouts, you're going to provide everything. Why there is no reason now why people cannot have this program in their libraries, because you have created something and you are gift wrapping it to the country and forgive me, to everyone tuning in right now. Wow. I love that. What an amazing feeling to be part of something that has the ability to resonate with young people and the librarians who are lucky enough to work with them.
It is truly incredible. And I have to say, we know that we want to help the teens directly. And the best way to do that is to give the flexible support to the trusted adults that work with them. Those teens out in Nebraska, they don't know me, they don't know Kelly, but they know their local librarian and they already trust them. So they are the best people to bring this information to that teen community.
I was going to pop in and add, I don't know how much of this is publicly available yet, not in like a secretive way, just in a it's not out there yet, but there will also be a really cool opportunity for young people in Michigan this coming November to do some of the activities from the guide through the Michigan Library Association. You should be hearing about that soon if you're in Michigan. That will reach the teens directly.
Love it. I'm in Metro Detroit, so you absolutely can be sure I will be keeping my ears to the ground and making sure that I find out everything I can to be able to spread the word.
I also do want to add that this, if let's say, you didn't hear about the program funding, this is the first time you're hearing about the toolkit, you have questions, please reach out to me. I'm not putting in my email there because I think it looks cool. I am putting it out there because I want to hear from you. I also want to hear from school librarians, public librarians, teen librarians, children's librarians, everybody about what it is that they need, what it is that they want, how we can best support them. I recognize that I'm sitting here in Brooklyn with, thankfully legal support, financial support, and a little bit of that, liberal sweater wrapped around my shoulders. But that's not the experience of librarians everywhere. And so in order for me to give them the help and support that they actually need, I need to understand better the landscape that they work in and the realities of their situation. I don't want to just kick open a door and say, hey, here's what I think you want. I want to understand what would actually be useful rather than assume.
Hashtag better together. Friends, I am so grateful that these two people have been able to share their time with us today. I love crossing paths with impactful people who have libraries in their hearts and want to make sure that we do whatever we can to empower our teens. Kelly Jensen, would you let listeners know how we can find you on social media or reach out to you if we want to get in touch?
Sure, you could always reach out to me on Bluesky at heykellyjensen. If you're not on Bluesky, same handle over on Instagram. I try to read and respond to as many DMs as I can. If I miss something, 99.99% of the time it's an accident, but that's the best way to reach me and ensure that I will be in touch best as I can. My inboxes, it doesn't happen as easily.
How about you, Emma? Thank you so much.
Sure. People can reach me at EEriksson at bklnylibrary.org. We don't have a Books Unbanned Instagram. The best way to kind of keep up with Books Unbanned social media is to just follow our Brooklyn Public Library account, which is BKLYN Library. Folks are also encouraged to check out our brand new redesigned website, which is www.booksunbanned.com. There they can find out what we've got going on. There's also an opportunity for them to sign up for our newsletter, which I hope will be launching in the fall, where it'll come out just once a month to let folks know what it is that we're doing, what we're working on, and opportunities for them to provide us feedback and stuff.
Friends, we will put all of that linked in the show notes. Friends, I am so grateful. Emma, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited for the rest of the country to learn about the amazing things that you both have been able to make happen for all of us. Thank you, and have a fantastic beginning of the fall.
You too. And same to all the school librarians and non-school librarians who are starting their year.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a great experience. Much appreciated.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. If you're curious to know how often your state or country has been featured on the podcast, simply click on the link, which can be found in our show notes. Search by title, author, state, and country, and do a Command F search. I hope this is the year you consider being a guest on the show. Please visit the FAQs in every episode, and you'll realize just how easy it is. We all have something to share. Make Season 8 your time to shine. Don't forget to participate in the Library of Congress survey in today's show notes and share your feelings on the proposed changes which are going to be made to the subject headings. I hope you take a look at the link to Junior Library Guild in our show notes. Friends, use the code UNITED15 to receive 15 free books with your first shipment. Be sure to tune in next Friday, September 5th, when I'm joined by Florida School Librarian Jose Cruz, and we'll discuss horror in our elementary collection. I hope you will tune in.